The Holy Gospel according to St. Luke, the 15th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
The apostles said to the Lord, "Increase our faith." The Lord replied, "If you had faith the size of a mustard seed, you could say to this mulberry tree, 'Be uprooted and planted in the sea,' and it would obey you. Who among you would say to your slave, who has just come in from plowing or tending sheep in the field, 'Come here at once and take your place at the table'? Would you not rather say to him, 'Prepare supper for me, put on your apron and serve me while I eat and drink. Later you may eat and drink'? Do you thank the slave for doing what is commanded? So you also, when you have done all that you were ordered to do, say, 'We are worthless slaves. We have done only what we ought to have done.'" The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
You may be seated. Faith the size of a mustard seed. Now in this gospel, Jesus says, faith the size of a mustard seed, you could tell a tree to uproot itself, walk across land, and go to the sea, and it would. In other gospels, it goes like this. If you had the faith the size of a mustard seed, you could tell that mountain to get up, sprout legs, walk over there, and it would. Imagine that. The kind of faith that would give you power to change all elements of life around you, control over even inanimate objects, the ability to move things. And if you're any kind of nerd, you think of Star Wars, Jedi and the Force, right? Moving one thing to another with just the force, the power that exists. That's certainly what I think of here. And similarly, in the context of the text, the disciples are seeing the great deeds that Jesus is doing and saying, "I want that power too. Increase our faith so that we might heal the sick, feed multitudes, bring the dead back to life, squash power, take control. Increase our faith, God, so that we might do great deeds as well." And Jesus, I can almost see him smile at the arrogance of it. What would you do with it? Don't you see even a tiny amount of faith, a tiny amount of faith could do things beyond your imagination. The faith the size of a mustard seed could do things beyond your comprehension, could put superheroes to shame. Imagine the power. Would you use it for good? I wonder. In that I hear so many things. I intended it for good, but it became evil. I could envision in the life of the church, people have all sorts of gifts and powers already, and if you've been part of the church any amount of time, you've seen people misuse those gifts and powers. Imagine the fights that would take place if you could move mountains. Imagine that. You wake up and you look in your lawn, there's a tree you don't want, you move it over to the neighbor's yard, right? The neighbor gets up, sees you move that tree into his yard, he puts 20 in yours, right? Next thing you know, the neighbor wants ocean view, he moves the mountain, so he's got ocean view, right? This kind of thing would happen, right? It would totally happen. We have seen destruction among good people who intend well all the time. We're prone to misuse and abuse these opportunities. And Jesus says, do you understand that if you had even the tiniest amount of faith, how grand a power that would really be? Huh? And then goes on to say, what you have is enough. What you have is enough. Now, maybe at an individual level, you and I can't move mountains by ourselves. But in this space today, I bet there's enough faith in this room right now that we could. Jesus seems to open up the door to opportunity, to believe that God's people are capable of amazing and fantastic good. That God's people can heal the sick, care for the lonely, be with the grieving, work with the addicted, visit the imprisoned, love the forsaken. That God's people are capable of feeding the hungry, of doing these things, because faith is not something in here or in here. Faith is something you do. It's an action word. Faith is something you do. And the church, the people of God, those gathered in this space now, are capable of changing the world. Not as individuals, but in community together. And you say, Pastor, the world? Changing the world? The world? Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. In fact, look at history. It is only small groups of faithful people who have ever changed the world. Only. The larger the group, the less likely they are to succeed, frankly. It is only ever small groups of faithful people that change the world. In the course of history, it is repeated over and over and over again. And the crazy thing, Jesus expects it of us. This dialogue about how you treat a slave, right? Okay, so first off, slavery was totally different in Jesus' day than modern slavery, than what you and I think of slavery, certainly slavery in America's. It was a way of life. Only about 30% of the people at the time were not slaves or part of some kind of slavery system. It was part of having a job. It's like saying being employed, right? So, if you have an employee, do you call them in after they work and make them CEO? Not normally. And that's what Jesus is implying here. If you have a slave that does their job, you say, well done for doing their job. That's their job. And Jesus implies then that where there is great faith, great things will be done. And after they've done those great things, they won't pat themselves on the back so much as say, we simply did what we were supposed to do. That Jesus expects us, in fact, to use our faith to do amazing things. And then to acknowledge, well, we did something amazing. We don't need to put on a pedestal. That's what we were supposed to do. That God gives us faith to accomplish great tasks. And what does faith look like? It looks like a community garden. It looks like a feeding ministry. It looks like donations to feed the hungry. It looks like generosity to care for the poor. It looks like men and women with those who are sick and dying, or those who are grieving. It looks like friends who show up when you need them. It looks like a shoulder to lean on. It looks like love and sacrifice. That's what faith looks like. And it's what is expected of us. So that in fact, when we don't live out faith, we sell ourselves short. Because in this community, right here in this space, we are capable of great and mighty things. And it's expected of us to transform the world and lives around us for what is good and right and wonderful. We can, we must, we will, and we should. And at the end, we'll look back and say, not us, but God through us. And we did precisely what we were born to do, and nothing less. Amen.